Joyous people celebrate a life so grand. Hey, mister, read that fairy tale again. Ooh, I've seen it, though you won't believe it. It's a miracle year in which we're living. Come on outside, it's a beautiful day. A gentle breeze blows across the ocean, sending waves that crash upon the sand. Hey, mister, did you watch Slow Down again? There is time for you to smell the flowers, even though the thorns get in the way. Hey, mister, what's your theory?
Hello there, everybody. Welcome to another exciting John Chappell Natural Philosophy session. I'll just check to make sure it's coming through on YouTube. So hold on a moment, please. Okay, so it seems to be working on YouTube. The sound is anyway. So getting on into today's session, welcome you all to this session. And what I'm doing today is looking at Stephan Gift's paper on Selleri Transformations, and it's using artificial intelligence, AI, so to see what it says about it. So I'll make my screen bigger. Right, screen's bigger, and here we go. And nothing's happening. Next slide. Right, here we go. So this is the paper I'm looking at. I'm impressed by it, but disagree with a few things. What I've looked at has been a rough draft of it, but you can get the paper at that address there. I think they want money. So let's see. Yes. So ideally, you need to see that paper because we'll be analysing it, and then might go off at a bit of a tangent. We have problems understanding whether it's a theory that replaces special relativity or not. So first, a few preliminaries. So a general note is the term light speed usually means light speed in vacuum in the context of inertial frames, without influence on it by such things as gravity. So it's usually meant in the context of special relativity. And if you're talking about other types of light speed, like global light speed, then you have to make it clear what type of light speed you're talking about. But light speed seems to be a shorthand for just dealing with light speed in the context of special relativity. And so this is the paper that starts all the problems as far as I'm concerned. It's Einstein's first paper on special relativity, which he got published in 1905. And from my point of view, it's a vague theory. It's a lot of things as said by Einstein, which don't really make too much sense. And it seems very ambiguous, but getting the mainstream people to believe, to agree with that is very difficult. And they seem to accept it. And sort of have to accept it, and they sort of then start doing modifications and add-ons and changes and so forth, which makes the thing even more confusing. And so the AI that I want to use is ChatGPT, and it's my favorite AI that I've come across. It seems to collect information together which would otherwise be difficult to obtain, and it's prepared to look at things from different points of view, and I find all that very good. So it will look at things from my point of view, and it will look at things from, say, the mainstream point of view, and give its sort of rough opinion on those sort of things. And it's prepared to accept that from my point of view, relativity looks wrong, even though from the mainstream point of view it doesn't look wrong, and it will point out why that is. So I've been looking here to see if anybody's putting any hands up or anything. Nobody is. Let's have a look at the comments. Oh yeah, I think I'm all right. Nobody's complaining at the moment. If it shows when I go to big screen, I can't see any comments anymore. So I'm just going to blunder ahead and give my talk and see what happens at the end. So these are the Selleri transformations shown there, and you can contrast them to the Lorentz transformations, and hopefully most people here on the this Saturday session are fully aware of the Lorentz transformations, so it's not saying anything new to them. But when you look at this, you can see that the Selleri transformations look quite a bit different. It's the mainly the time coordinate which is different. It's t prime with the t transformation is different to what the Lorentz transformations does, and part of that is to do with the clock synchronization which the Selleri transformations are using. So anyway, so the transformations look quite a bit different, and the issue becomes what are the correct transformations to use between coordinate inertial frames. Hopefully that was clear to everybody. And so this is the abstract from Stephan Gift's paper, and it says the following. So I'll read it out to you. Application of the Lorentz transformations uses the abbreviation LTs of special relativity to counter propagating light signals on a rotating platform results in an inconsistency known as the Selleri paradox. We therefore revisit the set of equivalent transformations derived by Selleri, where the different transformations in the set are defined by a single parameter E subscript 1, and including the Lorentz transformations corresponding to a particular non-zero value of E subscript 1. We present a new proof based on inertial frames of E subscript 1 equals 0 that corresponds to the Selleri transformations for which there is no paradox. We use the Selleri transformations to derive the GPS clock synchronization equation, which we show cannot be derived using the Lorentz transformations without a correction. Thomas precession predicted by the Lorentz transformations is for the first time also derived using the Selleri transformations. Finally, the 100-year-old right angle lever paradox is resolved using the Selleri transformations. And so from my point of view, I got several issues with this, which you can sort of like pick up from what the abstract is saying. So the Selleri transformation is not one which people who have been taught special relativity are usually told about, but you get onto the issue of rotating platform, and often people just say that the special relativity doesn't deal with rotation. So what Gift is talking about is applying it to a situation which many people I don't think the Lorentz transformations apply to. And further on down, where we get down to, he's saying that, talking about a correction to the Lorentz transformations. Well, many people, I think, who believe in special relativity would think in terms of the Lorentz transformations would require a sort of adjustment to deal with the platform problem. So so this is why it's with my terms that the special relativity and so forth is all very vague theory. It sort of like gets adjusted. Anyway, so this is Selleri. He's unfortunately died in 2013. He was an Italian theoretical physicist and professor at, I can't pronounce those sort of things because it's not English, it's somewhere in study of dark. He received his doctorate PhD at the University of Bologna in 1958, which happens to be when I was born, and was a fellow of the Institute National of Nuclear, beginning in 1959. He was a member of the New York Academy of Sciences and so forth, and something to do with Louis de Broglie, and served on the board of directors of the Italian Physical Society. So he's so he is a professional physicist, and he's the one that came up with the Selleri transformations, these transformations that are named after him. So Google AI gives a rough idea what's going on. It says the Selleri theory refers to the work of Italian physicist Selleri on the foundations of special relativity, particularly his weak relativity theory, which proposes that the one-way speed of light may not be the same in all directions, depending on the choice of clock synchronization. Selleri developed transformations that differ from the Lorentz transformations by a synchronization parameter, arguing his approach is consistent. Hold on a moment. My voice is rubbish. I need to have a drink of water. So he's using a synchronization parameter, arguing this approach is consistent with experimental results like the Banach effect, and the absolute simultaneity is a valid concept. So what you get from this is it's called a weak relativity theory. So it sounds like a different theory to special relativity from that context. So unfortunately, not everyone agrees with Selleri. So I got this paper from this person here I found on the internet, and he's disagreeing with what Selleri is saying. And he says that Seleri's main arguments for the restoration of absolute simultaneity in physics are analysed, and that's by this paper, by this person, and shown to be faulty. In particular, both the classical Banach effect and the recent so-called linear Banach effect can be dealt with within special relativity in a natural way. And when it says that, I think it's doing adjustments to the Lorentz transformations to make it agree. But this person is arguing you don't need a different theory. The appeal to the conventionality of simultaneity thesis is also shown to be ineffectual. Other arguments, such as the two-spatial argument and the block universe argument, are briefly examined. Notwithstanding a negative overall assessment, the importance of keeping alive the research on the foundations of relativity is emphasized, and Seleri's role in this undertaking is appreciated. So this person, Marco, disagrees with what Selleri is saying, and so it makes it all very more complicated issue of having to look at what Stephan Gift is talking about and contrast it with all these critics of Seleri's theory. And unfortunately, it's going to be beyond the context of this talk. So, for me, from my point of view, Seleri's idea seems to be to replace special relativity with his theory called weak relativity. And so now it's getting on to my favorite AI, which is ChatGPT. And I've asked it about Stephan Gift's paper. I inputted that into the AI and see what it says about it to get some sort of contrast of opinions. I mean, you don't necessarily have to agree with AI, but it's going to give you sort of a point of view on Stephan's paper, rather than just having to take his word for it. So ChatGPT AI thanks me for sharing the full paper with it, and it's the rough draft which I was given, and so hopefully there's not that much difference with the published version. So I get in it, ChatGPT says I'll give you a structured assessment of whether it is scientifically correct based on mainstream physics. So that's ChatGPT is giving me a mainstream point of view on Stephan's paper, and that's why I like it. I can get contrast. I can get Stephan's point of view from his paper, and you can get, well, what does the mainstream think point of view. So anyway, the AI starts off by summarizing the paper, and it points out the author, which is Stephan Gift, critiques the Lorentz transformations and revisits his Selleri transformations. And the paper then claim is that the Selleri transformations resolve paradoxes such as the Selleri paradox and so forth, and explains phenomena like the GPS synchronization and Thomas precession without corrections. And the corrections would be if you were using Lorentz transformations. I believe that if you were using those for those paradoxes, you would need to put some corrections onto it. And so the key argument is light speed invariance is not required. Instead, a preferred frame, like an Earth-centered inertial frame, exists. And the conclusion of the paper is Selleri transformations provide an alternative to Lorentz transformations and avoids paradoxes. So AI wants to tell me what it considers correct about the paper, and it's going to tell me what it also thinks wrong later. And it says Seleri's work is real. Selleri and others, such as those names mentioned, have indeed argued for alternative formulations of relativity with a preferred frame. So when it says alternative formulations, I find that problematic to me from my point of view, because you got special relativity, the way that it's supposed to be dealt with, and suddenly, we can form relativity from a different way. So when you form it a different way, does it count as the same theory or a different theory? And next, it points out the one-way speed of light is untested. Experimentally, only the two-way round-trip constancy of light speed is directly confirmed. The one-way speed depends on synchronization conventions. So in principle, Selleri transformations are not outright ruled out by experiment. So the issue on this is sometimes people who believe in special relativity don't realize that the one-way speed of light has not really been measured. It's only the two-way that's been measured. Where, say, if you've got light going from a point A to a point B and then back to a point A, that is two-way, and that speed has been measured. The speed of that light has been measured. But if you're talking about light moving from an A point A to a point B, that speed has not been measured. And the problem there is with, if you've got a clock at A and a clock at B, is how do you synchronize them? And that leads to problems in relativity about synchronization of clocks. Next, ChatGPT says GPS synchronization is subtle. GPS does require relativistic corrections. That's using special relativity and general relativity. That's the mainstream point of view. And some formulations can be rewritten in terms of Selleri type assumptions. But this doesn't mean standard relativity is invalid. It just means different mathematical conventions can give equivalent practical results. So from the point of view of the ChatGPT, Einstein's relativity works, and this Selleri version is just an alternative way of doing things. Next, it goes on to the Thomas precession and the Lever paradox, etc. Selleri showed Selleri transformations can be used to reproduce these phenomena. This is mathematically consistent, though not unique, and standard special relativity explains them too. So it's claiming that special relativity still works, even though you can do it the Selleri transformations way as well. Next. And so AI then wants to go on to say what is problematic. And number one is the violation of light speed invariance. And Selleri transformations predict anisotropic, direction-dependent one-way light speeds. And so far, there's no confirmed experiment showing such a thing as anisotropy. Michelson and Morley type modern tests, GPS timing, and resonator experiments all strongly support isotropy at certain precision. And number three is the east-west asymmetry claims, and it's talking about what Marmot and Kelly, etc., are saying, and that's not accepted by the mainstream physics. They are considered misinterpretations of GPS timing. Next, number two, preferred frame assumption. Special relativity requires no preferred frame. Seleri's approach does. Two, cosmic microwave background can define a cosmological preferred frame, but that does not imply physics laws depend on it. Experiments show relativity works the same in all inertial frames. And my comment is I find the way that preferred frame is dealt with in Einstein relativity is confusion. A preferred frame is allowed, so say for cosmic microwave background, and it exists in the context of standard relativity, and denying preferred frame on other occasions doesn't seem to make sense to me. Also, I don't like where this comment about where it rejects Marmot and Kelly, because they are dissidents and they have criticized Einstein's relativity. So, but what it's basically doing is dismissing some of our well-known, to a certain extent, critics of relativity as to what they're saying against relativity. And so I put my question to ChatGPT and it replied, that's a really good observation, and you touched the exact spot where many people get confused and where Selleri and others try to fix relativity. And that's the issue of the preferred frame. So a general thing which most people who believe Einstein's relativity say is there's no preferred frame. But then suddenly that gets twisted around a bit by some of them who say that the cosmic microwave background is a preferred frame. Next, and I say, unfortunately, ChatGPT then goes off on a long explanation, which I find unhelpful. of trying to explain there is a preferred frame in some sense, and there's not a preferred frame in some other sense. So this preferred frame is a complete and utter confusion issue in Einstein's relativity from my point of view. And then, so ChatGPT, when it's criticizing Sorelli's paper, goes on to say the following: it's a misrepresentation of GPS, and standard relativity does not derive the GPS synchronization equation when general relativity is included. The correction the paper, which by Gift says calls out, is simply the general relativity treatment of rotating frames on the Banach effect, and it's not a failure of the Lorentz transformations. And so that's, from my point of view, that's when they add on extra things to the Lorentz transformations to help make it deal with rotation. Number 4 is experimental confirmation. The paper by Gift claims Sorelli transformations are empirically confirmed, and that's for the east-west, GPS signals, superluminal claims, etc. These results are not accepted by the physics community. The overwhelming consensus is that experiments confirm Lorentz invariance. So that's the mainstream point of view. It's believing that the Lorentz transformations are confirmed by experiment. And so if you're trying to say you shouldn't be using those Lorentz transformations, but you should be using the Sorelli transformations instead, you're hitting that problem where the mainstream is thinking you don't need to replace the Lorentz transformations. Anyway, in my view, my point of view, general relativity is an update to special relativity. And the usual way that the pro-relativity deal with GPS and the Banach effect and all these other problems which don't necessarily work in the context of special relativity is to appeal to general relativity and not just stick to special relativity. So this idea of going from the Lorentz transformations of special relativity to Sorelli transformations, to my mind, just makes it seem that the Sorelli transformations are a part of Einstein's relativity. Anyway, the verdict which AI is going to give me is the paper by Gift is internally consistent but not correct by mainstream physics standards. That's the mainstream physics point of view. It's not agreeing with what Gift is saying. So the Sorelli transformations are mathematically valid as an alternative synchronization convention, but they do not replace Lorentz transformations. And this is the mainstream point of view. And the reasons they're given for that is because the Lorentz they predict anisotropic one-way light speed. This is Sorelli transformations, which is strongly constrained experimentally. So they're not getting this variation in one-way light speed, which the Sorelli transformations want. And next is all high-precision experiments to date support standard special relativity. So they're claiming here in this part that there's no experiments showing the Sorelli transformations. And that's contrary to what Gift is talking about, because he's saying the Sorelli transformations explain certain experiments. And the paradoxes in special relativity are resolved within the special relativity itself. So that's the mainstream point of view. So the paradoxes which Gift thinks he's solving by using the Sorelli transformations, the mainstream is still thinking they can deal with it in special relativity. So in short, this is what ChatGPT is saying. The paper, this is by Gift, is not correct in the sense of accepted physics. It presents a non-standard alternative that has been explored for decades, but is considered unnecessary and contradicted by modern experimental precision. And so I'm getting ChatGPT AI to then go through the paper and check it for things. On I'll just make sure there's nothing happening in the comments. So hold on a moment. No, I think I'm all right. Nobody's making too much of a fuss as far as I can see. I'll go back to large screen again. So ChatGPT is telling me the paper is correct when it says Selleri transformations exist, and the one-way speed of light cannot be measured. Cannot be directly measured. So tick, the Gift is correct in saying that, but it pointed out it's misleading, saying special relativity requires corrections, and it's from my point of view, as I tried to explain earlier, I think special relativity does need corrections when it's dealing with things like rotation, which they get added on by going up to general relativity. So you can't actually deal with special relativity all the time. But ChatGPT is taking that idea of saying that special relativity requires corrections as misleading. And it's to suggest Lorentz transformations are flawed is also deemed misleading. In fact, these effects are predicted by special relativity stroke general relativity directly, and I think ChatGPT is letting me down there when it's saying that, because I'm saying that general relativity is sort of a correction to special relativity, but it's trying to muddle things up there. So, as I'm pointing out here, I would, in my view, think that going from special relativity to general relativity was some sort of correction, and ChatGPT is trying to mess that up. Anyway, next, ChatGPT says generalized transformations, and it says Stephan's paper is correct when it points out Selleri transformations are mathematically consistent and reduced to Lorentz transformations for certain synchronization choices. So tick once again for Stephan Gift's paper, it's correct about that, but it wants to point out that's misleading, claiming they are more fundamental. In physics, different synchronization choices are just conventions. They don't change actual experimental predictions. And so this ties into my problem I have with Einstein's relativity. If you're going to synchronize things differently, which you have with these Selleri transformations, is that still supposed to be part of Einstein's relativity or not? Next, and so number 3 on the Selleri transformations, it says is correct. Selleri transformations predict an isotropic one-way light speed and absolute simultaneity tick. So Stephan Gift is correct in pointing that out. And what it says is incorrect is that Stephan Gift's paper suggests anisotropy has been experimentally confirmed. So it's disagreeing with that. It says all modern resonator and optical cavity experiments show isotropy to extreme precision. And I would argue, from my point of view, I would argue against those interpretations of experiments. I argue against mainstream interpretation of those experiments. Number 4 is the paradoxes of relativity. And ChatGPT AI says Stephan Gift is correct that when he says that Selleri transformations avoid certain paradoxes because they assume absolute simultaneity. But what he claim is incorrect about the paper is that special relativity also resolves these. The mainstream also claims that special relativity also resolves these paradoxes. Paradoxes only arise if thought experiments are misinterpreted. And in my view, Einstein's relativity is, to a large extent, a misinterpretation of experiments, but ChatGPT is twisting it around from what it considers the mainstream point of view, and it takes it that if you're if you're disagreeing with special relativity, then you are misinterpreting experiments. But I don't think it that way around. I think it from the other way around. Number 5 is about the Thomas precession, and it says paper is correct by Gift that Selleri transformations can describe Thomas precession without extra corrections. What it claims is misleading is in special relativity, Thomas precession arises naturally from successive Lorentz boosts. It's not an ad hoc correction. So, in my view, successive Lorentz boost is an ad hoc correction, but ChatGPT is presenting what it considers the mainstream point of view, which is not looking at those things as ad hoc corrections. So I'm disagreeing again with the mainstream point of view. Next is GPS synchronization. And Gift's paper, it deems as correct when it says GPS relies on relativity and uses the Earth-centered inertial coordinates as a reference frame. But it claims that the paper is incorrect in claiming that Lorentz transformations fell for GPS. And in fact, it says special relativity and general relativity accurately project GPS corrections, including the Sanak effect. There is no contradiction. From my point of view, it's again using general relativity by the mainstream point of view, which I consider a correction of special relativity to move it to general relativity. Number 7, it says about the Selleri transformations and experiments, and it says about Gift's paper, it says it's correct about saying that Selleri argued that east-west anisotropes might appear in GPS, but what it's pointing out is incorrect from the mainstream point of view. It says no experimental confirmation exists. All GPS synchronization studies confirm special relativity predictions within experimental error. Evidence cited in this by Marmot and Kelly is not extracted by mainstream physics. And I don't like the results of Marmot and Kelly being dismissed because they are dissidents who are disagreeing with Einstein's relativity, and it's just too easily dismissing what they're saying. Anyway, and it goes on to the conclusion, and it claims Gift's paper is correct in pointing out that Seleri's approach is mathematically self-consistent. But what it thinks is incorrect is saying it's experimentally superior to special relativity. In reality, modern tests, which is the Michelson-Morley upgrades and resonators, particle accelerators, GPS timing, and the Large Hadron Collider experiments, overwhelmingly confirm Lorentz invariance. So mainstream is fully believing in the Lorentz transformations. And from my point of view, putting that in, I think those experiments are just being interpreted by Einstein relativity, and you can actually interpret them by other theories. So ChatGPT AI gives us its final judgment on Stephan Gift's paper. It says it's philosophically interesting. Selleri transformations show relativity can be described with different synchronization conventions, but it is not scientifically correct in its claims of experimental superiority. And standard special relativity remains experimentally confirmed to an extraordinary level of precision. Seleri's ideas are regarded as a different language, not a replacement for special relativity. So I pick on the bit where it says Selleri transformations show relativity can be described with different synchronization conventions. And that makes it sound like Selleri transformations are just now being considered part of Einstein's relativity when it says that, and not treating it as a separate theory. So I'm going to look at that issue of the confusion of whether Sorelli's theory, or which is called weak relativity, is it a different theory to Einstein's relativity or not. So from my point of view, it's sounding, based on what AI is saying, it's sounding like, which is dealing with the mainstream point of view, it sounds like the mainstream point of view is tending to move to the idea that Selleri transformations are part of Einstein's relativity, and that's contrary to what Stephan Gift says, because he says in this paper, in closing, we note that while the Selleri transformations are not part of mainstream space-time physics, they offer an internally consistent and empirically viable alternative to the Lorentz transformations, as they reproduce many key phenomena without any inconsistencies. So, in my interpretation, that Stephan Gift is trying to propose the Selleri transformations as a different theory to the mainstream's Einstein relativity, but the mainstream are just tending towards the idea that the Selleri transformations are part of Einstein's relativity, just another way of viewing Einstein's relativity. So I have a bit more water for my voice. Yep. So give me a minute to get my voice back. So I put this question to Selleri I put this question to ChatGPT about Selleri. It says, my question is, did Selleri think he had a theory with Selleri transformations that was a theory that could replace special relativity, ? And ChatGPT said, yes, exactly. Selleri developed what are now called Selleri transformations as part of a neo-Lorentzian framework that he proposed could serve as a physically coherent alternative to Einstein's special relativity. So first of all, I'm going to point out that Lorentz theory deals with the Lorentz transformations, and so does special relativity. And to a large extent, Lorentz theory is a different interpretation of how to deal with the Lorentz transformations. But building upon the idea of Lorentz theory, you get what you now called neo-Lorentzian theories. Anyway, continuing on, key points about his view, this is Seleri's view, is number one, absolute time and a preferred frame. Selleri insisted that there is a true rest frame, the ether frame. So it's good there. He could bring it back, the ether again, which is good. And normally the people who believe in Einstein's relativity say there's no ether. Anyway, and that simultaneity is absolute, in contrast to special relativity's relativity of simultaneity. So in special relativity, you've got relative simultaneity, and now suddenly you can bring back absolute simultaneity, and I like that. That's good as well. Number two, experimental equivalence, but different interpretation. He acknowledged that this is Selleri, acknowledged that special relativity and his framework make the same predictions for most standard experiments. And it's the Michelson-Morley in the usual sort of experiments. But he argued that special relativity's interpretation is metaphysically and conceptually misleading. And I've talked about the metaphysics of special relativity and that, and I don't like it. It's a mess. So Selleri seems to be taking the similar sort of point of view on that. ChatGPT continues, Selleri transformations. These are a set of space-time transformations between inertial frames that preserve absolute simultaneity. They reduce the Lorentz transformations in certain limits, but allow for an asymmetric description of moving clocks and light propagation consistent with a preferred frame. And as a replacement of special relativity, Sorelli explicitly frames its prose as an alternative theory of relativity, not just a reinterpretation. He believed that his framework could replace special relativity while keeping empirical adequacy. He often called it inertial transformations or inertial theory of relativity. That's his theory, which I pointed out is sometimes called weak relativity. So ChatGPT, in his view, says, so yes, Sorelli thought he had a fully fledged alternative theory, not just a reinterpretation aiming to restore a more classical Lorentzian view while still accounting for relativistic effects like length contraction and clock behavior. So that contrasts earlier with, from what I was saying, that the mainstream seems to be wanting just to take the Selleri transformations as an alternative way of dealing with Einstein's relativity. So the question I then ask is the theory with Selleri transformations a different theory to special relativity? Question mark. And ChatGPT says yes, and that seems to be contrary to what he was saying in the context of other questions, where it seemed to be implying that the mainstream wanted to interpret Selleri transformations as an alternative way of viewing Einstein's relativity. So it's kind of contradiction itself a bit here, in my view. It's trying to have things both ways. So anyway, going with what ChatGPT says, yes, a theory based on Selleri transformations is considered a different theory from Einstein's special relativity. And I think it's a bit different here that for Einstein's relativity, you've got, which really consists of both general relativity and special relativity. So even if you go for a different theory than special relativity, such as Sorelli's theory, you could still consider Sorelli's theory as being in the part of general relativity. Anyway, carrying on, and what ChatGPT says is, and here's why. Why I think special relativity is different to Sorelli's theory. It says, here's why. Number one, special relativity, Einstein, is built on the principle of relativity. All initial frames are equivalent. It uses Lorentz transformations, which imply relativity of simultaneity. And I like against that as well, because I think from Lorentz theory, you wouldn't put that interpretation on things. But anyway, carrying on, it says time dilation and length contraction. That's what you get from special relativity. And there's no preferred absolute rest frame in special relativity. So what it says about Sorelli's theory is it uses Selleri transformations which keep the two-way speed of light invariant. So most standard experiments give the same results. And that's between the Selleri theory and special relativity. And next, Sorelli's Sorelli's theory assumes absolute simultaneity, and there's no relativity of simultaneity, and it introduces a preferred inertial frame, something like a modern ether. And this violates Einstein's relativity principle, so it's not the same theory. And I think this relativity principle can be interpreted different ways. So when they say Einstein's relativity principle, I think that's a bit vague, because you could put different interpretations onto what the relativity principle is. But anyway, carrying on. Number three, the relationship between the two. That's the two theories. Experimentally, Sorelli's framework reproduces most predictions of special relativity, which is why it hasn't been easily ruled out by many tests, i.e. by experiments. The experiments don't disagree with Sorelli's theory. It fits in with the experiments that have been done. Anyway, conceptually, it is a different physical theory, a kind of Lorentz ether type theory, and it's not Einstein's relativity. And when it says Einstein's relativity, I think that's vague again, because you've got both general relativity and special relativity, which is what is meant by Einstein's relativity. And in the context here, it really should be saying special relativity. Anyway, what ChatGPT says is, so to answer directly, a theory based on Selleri transformations is not special relativity, but rather an alternative relativistic theory with a preferred frame. So my next question is, are Selleri transformations considered not part of special relativity, but still part of Einstein relativity, where it is general relativity and special relativity? And ChatGPT said, let's carefully unpack this. So it's not going to give me a direct answer, it's just going to waffle through things. Because, and it says, because the distinction you're asking about is subtle but important. You're getting on to the subtle things here. Number one, what Selleri transformations are. Selleri transformations are a class of transformations proposed by Selleri that preserve the form of Lorentz invariant predictions for certain experiments. And I don't have to say what these experiments are again, it's the time dilation and so forth, but assume an absolute simultaneity. Mathematically, they are a subset of transformations that look like Lorentz transformations, but with a preferred frame. So it's using it's a subset. So when it sort of uses the term subset, you can treat it is part of the same mathematics, even though it looks slightly different. So it's looking like it's trying to say the Selleri transformations are still part of Einstein's relativity because it's sort of like a subset. Anyway, continuing, what ChatGPT says, they typically have the form or variance depending on conventions, but crucially, the time coordinate can be absolute in the preferred frame. So the relationship to special relativity, you call standard special relativity, and I don't think that term's really precisely defined, because I've given talks on special relativity before, and people do say different things. So what particular version of special relativity is supposed to be the standard one? I've never understood what is supposed to be the standard version of it. Anyway, but assuming that there is such a thing as standard special relativity, there's no preferred frame, simultaneity is relative, Lorentz transformations connect inertial frames, Selleri transformations violate the relativity of simultaneity, so they're not strictly part of standard special relativity. They are usually interpreted as a Lorentz covariant alternative, often called a neo-Lorentzian or Lorentz ether viewpoint. And so number 3, it goes on to relationship to general relativity and special relativity. General relativity is locally Lorentz invariant. So I don't think things are properly explained here. Usually general relativity is considered a global theory and special relativity is a local theory. And when you're dealing with things locally, general relativity is supposed to reduce to special relativity. Anyway, continuing, ChatGPT says that is every infinitesimal region of space-time, physics reduces to special relativity. If you take general relativity and assume a global Minkowski metric, which is flat space-time, you recover special relativity. Selleri transformations in this context, Selleri transformation can be applied formally in a flat space-time context, but they are not required by Einstein's relativity. And this time it's taken Einstein's relativity to be both special relativity or general relativity. They can be seen as an alternative coordinate choice in flat space-time with a preferred frame. In a sense, they are compatible with Einstein's equations in the sense that you can describe flat spacetime using them, but they are not derived from Einstein's postulates. They assume extra structure, and that extra structure is supposed to be absolute simultaneity instead of relative simultaneity. So ChatGPT wants to give the summary. Selleri transformations are not part of standard special relativity because they violate relative simultaneity. They are formally compatible with general relativity in flat spacetime or locally, but they are not required by general relativity. So, to a certain extent, it's saying that the Selleri transformations are part of general relativity, but general relativity doesn't really have to have them. They are often interpreted as Lorentz reinterpretations of special relativity. So, in this sense, it's trying to make him out just to be an alternative interpretation of special relativity to go by the Selleri transformations. Anyway, continuing, it says within an Einstein framework, which is why some people might say they are still part of Einstein's relativity, and that's it. So it's pointing out some people, certain people's point of view, the Selleri transformations are still part of Einstein relativity. So it's not a different theory from that point of view, in a loose sense, though. But strictly speaking, they represent a different physical assumption, a preferred frame, absolute time. So, loosely speaking, Selleri transformations get treated as if they are still part of Einstein relativity. But strictly speaking, you shouldn't be doing that. So, in my view, I think it's a grey area whether Selleri transformations are part of Einstein's relativity or not. And so I'm putting that to ChatGPT. And it says exactly, it agrees, it's a grey area. AI says it's a very much a grey area, and the reason is conceptual rather than purely mathematical. And he wants to break it down and give a long thing about it. Number one, mathematical compatibility. The Selleri transformations can be applied in flat spacetime and reproduce all the experimentally confirmed predictions of special relativity and its usual things of time dilation and so forth. From a purely formal perspective, you can write Einstein's equations all mechanically spacetime metric in coordinates consistent with Selleri transformations, so mathematically nothing breaks. Number two, conceptual incompatibility. Special relativity is built on two postulates. The laws of physics are the same in all inertial frames. The speed of light is the same in all inertial frames. And the speed of light thing is problematic. It's whether you're really talking about one way or two way or the rest of it. And so ChatGPT says Selleri transformations introduce a preferred frame and assume absolute simultaneity, which violates the first postulate. So while Selleri transformations reproduce the predictions, they reject the conceptual foundation of Einstein's special relativity. So ChatGPT wants to go on to how people interpret it. Some physicists call Selleri transformations a Lorentz reinterpretation of special relativity. All predictions match special relativity, but the metaphysics is different. And so when they're doing it that way, it's sounding like they're treating the Selleri transformations as just part of Einstein's relativity. While other physicists argue Selleri transformations are outside special relativity because special relativity is defined by its postulates, and the Selleri transformations violate them. And it wants to go on to about the general relativity context. Selleri transformations can be used in local inertial frames, but general relativity itself does not require nor imply a preferred frame. And I would find that arguable. I don't understand that interpretation of general relativity. I think you could interpret general relativity to have a preferred frame. But anyway, this is what ChatGPT says. So Selleri transformations are optional coordinate choices rather than a derivation of Einstein relativity. So ChatGPT wants to give the bottom line mathematical grey area. You can use them in Einstein's flat space-time framework and the physical stroke philosophical grey area. They contradict Einstein's postulates. So whether you call them part of relativity depends on whether you care about predictions only or postulates plus metaphysics. So the grey area becomes, how is Einstein's relativity supposed to be defined? I don't know, it might jumped. Hold on. Next. So, here we go. Conclusion. Anyway, I waffled on for so long here by that interrogation of ChatGPT. I then wanted to interrogate it about other things. And I had further argument with the AI ChatGPT, and it reveals that it's saying that Einstein's relativity, which is special relativity and general relativity, is incomplete in some areas where they have the Selleri transformations, which I think means a theory that is incomplete just needs things added to it. So if you've got an incomplete theory, then it's waiting there for you to add things to it, extra things. So you could just add extra things to it, like say the Selleri transformations, if you're treating it as an incomplete theory. So from that point of view, if authorities accept Selleri transformations, then they would just add them to Einstein's relativity. But my complaint then is with the scientific method. The scientific method is supposed to be about testing one theory against another. Allowing the theory to be incomplete goes against that method. So if you're treating Einstein's relativity as an incomplete theory, and you're allowing extra things to be added to it, then how are you actually testing theories? Seleri's come forward and has this as a different theory to Einstein's relativity, but Einstein's relativity is so vague because it's incomplete that then you could just add it to Einstein's relativity and still say it's Einstein's relativity, which goes against the method of how you're supposed to do physics. So that's my conclusion. So I'm in the dark here, so I don't like light. Okay, so that's my analysis of the paper. It's a confusion over whether you can treat the Selleri transformations as a different theory to Einstein's relativity or not. And the way that Einstein's relativity is so vague, it doesn't allow you to say definitively one way or the other what's going on. Right. Hello. Right, so if anybody wants to put their hands up. No, I got Stephan Gift here. Okay, he's nodding his head, don't know what that means. Okay, nobody's putting their hand up. I'll go through the comments, see if anybody's been able to follow this talk. What normally happens in the comments, people? Oh, he's put his hand up at this stage. Okay. Bring that down. Hi, Stephan. Okay.
Yes, good morning, Roger. Good morning to everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. How are you?
Oh, okay, thank you. I hope you're all right as well.
Good. All right. Well, I appreciate I appreciate you making my paper the subject of our Saturday presentation. It certainly will bring attention to the paper and its existence. And I just want everyone to know that the paper is actually available. It was published in Proceedings of the Royal Society A, but it's available on ResearchGate, both the form I submitted, which was accepted, and the form in which they printed it. So it's all there. So you're welcome to go to ResearchGate and read the paper. So Roger, you made an extensive treatment of the paper. You went through it quite extensively, and there are a number of points that were made, and I want to just comment on a few quickly. Okay. I think one of the main things I was hearing is that that the Selleri transformations are a different form of special relativity. Mm-hmm. And that's lingering along and so on, but that's not the case at all. If you look at the transformations just by observation, you will see, as you pointed out, the time transformations are different, and because of that, it makes the predictions of the two sets of transformations quite different in many instances. Now, it turns out many of the predictions are the same. So they both predict length contraction, time dilation, or clock retardation, and a number of other effects. But there are some differences, and perhaps I should just focus on the differences to make it clear to those who are listening in that the two transformations are basically two different theories, even though they have common predictions. They make a number of predictions that are the same, but they make a number that are different. So let me focus on the different ones. First of all, as you pointed out, Roger, the Selleri transformations predict one-way light speed non-invariance, not constant light speed, but variable light speed. And even though ChatGPT says that has not been confirmed and that the converse is true, that is one-way light speed constancy has been confirmed, that is actually incorrect. Zhang's book...
upon that point, I think the trouble is that ChatGPT is dismissing those sort of experiments which are claiming that.
Let me just put...
It has dismissed...
Let me set the record straight.
Okay.
ChatGPT gets a lot of stuff wrong, Roger, as you know.
I know, yeah. I'd agree that that would need looking into further, but from what ChatGPT is doing, it's trying to present the mainstream point of view.
Exactly.
And it dismisses certain experiments which are making that claim.
Right. So one experiment it didn't mention. Well, first of all, as I said, one-way light speed constancy has not been confirmed, and I refer to Zhang's 1997 book titled Special Relativity and Its Experimental Foundations. Mm-hmm. He points that out there. After examining all the experiments up to that point, he points out that there has been no one-way light speed confirmation of test of constancy of light, one-way light speed. So that's a simple fact that most physicists don't seem to know about, or don't want to know about it because it will contradict what they believe.
Yeah.
But that is a fact of life. That's one.
Yeah.
And then secondly, there are experiments which show light speed variation. One of us way back in 1976 by Saburai and his team, and that was published in the IEEE transactions. I can't remember which one of the transactions, but it's an IEEE publication, which is a mainstream publication in engineering. Yeah. And they actually sent signals from USA to Japan via a geostationary satellite, and found that when the signal went one way, it took a little longer time than when it went the other way. Yeah. And what that was consistent with, light travels faster west than east. And that is what they found in that experiment. Now, that
Mhm.
experiment is basically ignored, but it's there. And of course, you know about the 1985 so-called around the world Sagnac experiment. I'm sure you
Yeah.
know about that one. Well, that too showed that light going west took a shorter time than light going east. It's just that they choose to interpret it with this,
Yeah.
Sagnac correction stuff
Yeah.
and all of that. But the fact of the matter is, between two fixed points on the surface of the Earth, light travels faster west than east, and those two
Mhm.
experiments confirm
Yeah.
that
So
position.
the problem there is you're talking from further interrogations of ChatGPT. General relativity is a global theory, and special relativity is a local theory, and so it then splits it down to talking about the local light speed is a constant, but global light speed isn't. So it's supposed to be saying that general relativity accepts the variations of light speed in a global context.
Well, we're not dealing with general relativity, Roger. We're dealing with
Oh,
special
I'm sorry. Yeah,
relativity. You know,
from the mainstream point of view, what they seem to do is they go from special relativity, and when you have
they go
problems with
from
special,
special relativity to general when special
yeah,
relativity fails and they want to
yeah, they go to
rescue it.
general relativity. Yeah, so
So they reach out to general. Well, they should
that's
not be
right.
allowed to do that. They should
Well, that's
not
what
be
they do.
allowed to do that. We are comparing Selleri transformations and Lorentz transformations of special
Yeah.
relativity. That's what we are comparing. So let's continue quickly. So
No,
apart from that,
sorry. I point out. So that is correct. That's what they do. They update from special relativity to general relativity. And so when you get problems with special relativity, it's supposed to be corrected by general relativity. And so that they then say that the special relativity works. And
well,
then I
no,
was
it
trying to
doesn't. It doesn't work. If you have to
well,
use something else to correct it,
in it,
Roger, then it doesn't
what they
work.
talk about is a domain of applicability. So in the domain which they've tested it, it works. And what that
No.
domain,
Well, let me continue.
yeah,
I will tell
okay,
you some other areas where it doesn't work.
okay,
So let's continue. You know about the correspondence principle. You brought that out and in fact put forward a paper from Biling or whatever his name is, which
yeah,
showed that the Lorentz transformations do not really reduce to the Galilean transformations.
correct,
That's
yeah,
another fact.
yeah,
Correct? That puts that it has problems there. Then
yes, yeah,
something that most people don't know about is that the Lorentz transformations cannot handle superluminal signals.
yeah,
Superluminal signals result in causality violation in the Lorentz transformations. The Selleri transformations do not have that problem.
yeah,
So what the relativists do is they deny the existence of superluminal signals. They go to great lengths to deny and show that they don't really exist. But there are many papers in the literature showing that superluminal signals have been detected, and
yeah,
mainstream literature I'm talking about, not the dissident literature. So that's another one. And then the whole matter, there are these three experiments: the Michelson-Gale experiment,
yeah,
the Lorentz transformations predict a null result because it predicts constant light speed in all the arms of the apparatus.
yeah,
It can't handle the Wang experiment where you have the uniformly moving fiber optic tubes. That was a 2003 experiment. It can't, and there's no explanation in the literature for that experiment. And then clock synchronization, my paper which is the subject of this discussion.
yeah,
I showed in that paper that the clock synchronization that is required for the GPS, the algorithm cannot be produced by the Lorentz transformation. That was one of the key findings of that paper.
So what I get from special relativity is you've got a clock synchronization, which is called Einstein clock synchronization. And
No, Roger, no.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but no, Einstein synchronization cannot work, does not work with the GPS. Einstein synchronization.
But they do have different synchronizations. So if you're going from a synchronization which special relativity wants to a different synchronization, is that supposed to still be taken to be in the context of Einstein's relativity, which includes general relativity? So general relativity says, oh, you can use different synchronizations.
Well,
does
you
it say
cannot.
that?
You know, that's another myth that the relativists push so that they could explain away failings of special relativity.
Well, that's what they do. Yeah.
Let me point out, there's only one synchronization algorithm that works with the GPS, and the GPS works. We know it works. So if you go to Ashby's paper defines that algorithm. That's the one that works. There are all these others that they talk about, these different conventions. Those are all mythical. There's one that works.
You're saying it's mythical. I don't see how you can prove that.
I'm saying
the point of view they're presenting, the point of view the mainstream presents.
Only one works, Roger. That is the key point.
Yeah. But how do you prove that?
One works. And that one that works, the Lorentz transformations cannot derive it, but the Selleri transformations can derive it and use. That is one of the key points in my paper.
Yeah. But then, as I say, what you're saying that the mainstream says a myth. And the myth you're claiming is that they're still allowing different synchronizations.
Yeah, call them theoretical then, Roger. Yeah. If you don't like mythical, call them theoretical. But
I don't see how you can prove their point of view is a myth, actually. Sorry.
Well, okay. I withdraw the word myth if you don't like that word, but I'm saying there's one practical algorithm that works. None of the others work on the surface.
Well, it doesn't matter to them because they say that practical synchronization works is part of Einstein's relativity.
Well, I am saying no. It cannot be produced by the Lorentz transformations. And
I think they would accept that you have to do add-ons to the Lorentz transformations.
Well, and that's the problem. That's not part of special relativity. It's outside of the formalism of special relativity.
Yeah,
and therefore they are trying to trick us into
I don't see how you. Sorry, that's good. That's another good term, trick us. But I don't see how you can actually explicitly show what's going on there because they're making these claims about Einstein's relativity, and how do you manage to get down to the showing where the trick is? Because from my point of view, Einstein's relativity is vague about a lot of things. And the way they get around that is by saying that Einstein's relativity is incomplete. So you've got a theory which needs more things added to it by saying it's incomplete. So if you've got Selleri transformations as the thing that really works, then their point of view, Einstein's relativity is incomplete. We can just add on the Selleri transformations to it if they finally have a need for that. And so it's not a change from Einstein's relativity. It's just you're adding more things to it.
All right. So I withdraw the word trick since I don't want anybody to consider that your channel is making some wild statements. But I certainly, as I said, only one synchronization algorithm works and none of the others apply to the GPS. And I'm an engineer, and engineers, for us to be accepted, for our ideas to be accepted, they have to work. They have to work in practice. And the GPS works in practice, and it is synchronized using a specific algorithm. Mm-hmm. So that is the one that the Selleri transformations can derive. The Lorentz transformations cannot derive it. But let me put one other prediction to you then, Roger. The Lorentz transformations predict relative simultaneity. Mm-hmm. You spoke about that.
I think it assumes it. I think it assumes that instead of predicts it.
No, it does predict it. No, I have gone through this theory. It does predict it, Roger. It does predict it. If you go through the analysis, you will see. Take up any relativity book. It predicts relative simultaneity. the Selleri transformations predict.
Well, I don't see. When I analyze those, I don't see that. It's supposed to start from Einstein's relativity, special relativity. Supposed to be from two postulates, and in order to get
postulates, that's not a postulate, Roger. The
well,
postulates are
whatever you want to call them, it's not. Whatever it's two ideas. Then it sort of starts from two ideas, and then you've got to add extra things to it to get those ideas to work.
No, Roger.
So you've got to assume extra things to get those that to work.
Relative simultaneity is a prediction of. I will send you something if you wish.
You want to say it's a prediction, but I, from my point of view, you've got to assume those extra things, such as relative simultaneity, to actually get what Einstein's talking about to work.
Yeah, let's agree to disagree on that. No, let's agree to disagree.
Okay.
Well, I am quite certain that it's a prediction. You disagree. Well, let's just leave that there.
Well, I look at what Einstein says. He says certain things, and sort of like, well, how can you make that work? And you've got to add extra ideas to it, like relative simultaneity. And if you don't do that, you could go in a totally different direction from my point of view looking at it.
Roger, well,
so it's not a prediction.
I can't really say any more on that. As I said, I'm quite certain it's a prediction. I have actually worked out the prediction myself. It's and so I am sure that it is. But since we disagree, we could leave that alone.
Okay.
So I've made a number of points. I've given a number of experiments where the Lorentz transformations fail. I talked about superluminal signals, and I will sum up with this: the Selleri transformations predict all the confirmed predictions of the Lorentz transformations, all, including Thomas precession.
Yeah.
But it also goes beyond by explaining phenomena that the Lorentz transformations cannot explain. Good. I mentioned a few. I forgot to mention one in the paper, which is the right angle lever paradox. That is not worked out in special relativity as your ChatGPT tried to suggest. That is not the case at all.
Well, that's what ChatGPT says. When it sort of like explains those extra paradoxes, as far as I see it, it has to add extra things to special relativity to get it to work.
Yeah, well, adding extra things, I mean, I don't know what, but it makes clear predictions that are wrong.
What? Special relativity, you mean? Do you mean special relativity?
Yeah, the Lorentz transformations make specific.
Yeah, but I accept that the Lorentz transformation, the way it's set up, is for straight line motion, seems to be. And so when you've got rotation, you've got to do extra alterations to it. Sorry?
Outside of rotation, Roger, outside of rotation, the one experiment, for example, is a uniform motion, and it fails there. It can't explain that experiment because it predicts constant light speed.
So I didn't hear that.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, which experiment are you talking about? Sorry.
The Wang 2003 experiment where you have moving, it's like a linear Sagnac is sometimes what they call it, where you have moving fibers, uniformly moving fibers, and it can't explain that experiment. It cannot, and it can't explain it because it predicts constant light speed in the fibers, and constant light speed when you have counter propagating beams, they will come back with the same time, and there will be no time difference between them, and therefore no fringe shifts. Well, in the case of
I don't think mainstream accepts that. They do their alterations to.
They do not have an explanation, Roger. You check the literature. There's one explanation in a paper in Physical Review, and that explanation is what they did. They couldn't get and they got a null result in the moving frame, so they transform to the laboratory frame to get the correct answer. That's what they did.
So they have a bodge to do it then.
They have an attempt, but it is a failed attempt because it is finding the light speed, the time difference in the wrong frame. They're finding it in the laboratory frame and not in the moving frame.
Well, if it go to people like spout. You got all these people who say believe in Einstein's relativity, special relativity, and general relativity, and you got some of them who believe in Einstein's relativity and they do accept the idea of a preferred frame. So that makes an extra confusion onto things, because Spout, I think, who's got a Nobel Prize, he believes in a preferred frame. So if you're treating the lab frame as a preferred frame, then some of the people who believe in Einstein's relativity would accept that sort of bodge to it.
Well, I don't. So
Okay.
I have clear in my mind that there are two different theories.
To me, Einstein's relativity is not a properly defined theory. It's left a lot of things unanswered. It doesn't. It says some things.
You've said that for a long time, Roger.
I know.
I do not agree with you. I think
some things it is clear about, and other things it's not clear about.
I think it's sufficiently clear that we could test it, and if it's right, we will find out. If it's wrong, we will find out. And I have tested it, and I know that it is wrong.
Taking a point though, from my understanding, it's not clear what is being said when you've got rotation. From Einstein's special relativity, when I've read about it, it's unclear what he's saying in the case of rotation. So that leaves it open then to do different add-ons to it.
Okay. Well, maybe we could
he's dealing with straight line motion most of the time, and then he's putting the equations for that. But he's sort of like, what are the equations for when it's rotation? He's not really going into just sufficient detail about explaining things like that.
Well, maybe we could give somebody else a chance, if there anybody else who wishes to speak. I've said my piece, and
I go by what Einstein said, and he leaves certain things unanswered, and other people who've come after him have done add-ons to it, to relativity. So it's all just a build-up of different things, and it's all very vague as to its foundations and everything else, as to what add-ons you're allowed to do. You can build in different directions.
Yeah, right. So, Roger, let me just close then, if you give me a chance to just close. Yes, so I am saying I do not agree with you that special relativity is not properly defined. I consider that it is well enough defined that it could be tested by testing its predictions. I have done so, and I have found that I have found it wanting. I have tested the Selleri transformations in a similar way, and it has passed all the tests so far to which I have subjected it. So I am comfortable in advancing the Selleri transformations as the correct transformations that connect a preferred inertial frame to any other inertial frame. And I thank you for making this the subject of your presentation this morning and giving me a chance to actually make some comments about it. And as I said to our colleagues, they could find on ResearchGate the paper there, both the printed and my submitted version.
They give you a paper. Thank you
very much. Yeah, thanks a lot, Roger.
Okay, right. So I'll summarize. So you want to be moved now? I'll remove you. Finished?
Yes, finished? You can take me down now.
Okay, so I'll summarize. And to me, when I'm reading Einstein's relativity, it's not really clear as to whether Einstein is definitively saying that the Lorentz transformations are the only transformations you can use in his theory of relativity, and he's leaving that as incomplete. And by leaving it incomplete, you can then add on different types of transformations. I think what Gift is talking about, he thinks that Einstein's relativity, in the sense of special relativity, is definitively defined as being the Lorentz transformations. And taking that point of view, he is then testing the Lorentz transformations against what he's calling the Selleri transformations. But in my view, Einstein's relativity is not precisely defined. And so if you're saying you're testing Lorentz transformations against Selleri transformations, it's treating Selleri transformations as just another type of transformations that can also be considered part of Einstein's relativity. So I'm disagreeing with how he thinks Einstein's relativity is defined. Okay, thank you. Anybody else putting their hands up? No, nobody else wants to come in to argue about everything. Okay. Let's see what we've got in the comments then. So you go into the comments now. Most people are talking among themselves, so I don't see. If you want to talk to me, put down to Roger, so I can know what you're on about. Other people in the green room, they're not putting their hands up. Okay. No simple. So 3:28. So the people who sort of like start talking at 3 p.m. That's before my talk finished. So really, I need to look at people after that. So this person is saying, John Chappell, that's our founder of our Natural Philosophy Society. Maybe Alistair Bill's corrected interpretation of Einstein's special relativity should be considered. I think that word is supposed to be valid or original special relativity. What do you think? And so this is a problem. It's all like Alistair Bill has given, I think, a couple of talks now on relativity, and what he's talking about seems to be correcting Einstein's relativity. So you've got this problem of what are you doing with Einstein's relativity? Are you allowed to correct it or not? And if you correct it, is it still supposed to be Einstein's relativity? How can Einstein's special relativity be used as a base reference if it's full of obvious mistakes? Corrected version should be selected first and work from that baseline, in my humble opinion. Yeah, but there's nothing in the literature which is telling you what such a baseline would be. So you go to Einstein's first paper on special relativity, it's 1905, and that's been built upon, and the people who've come later seem to have made amendments to that. And so there's nothing being presented to us as what is supposed to be the definitive version of special relativity. You've got Einstein talking about it, and then you've got other people talking about it with their other amendments. So there's no definitive version. There is no baseline. Yeah, so you talk about the range of applicability, and I don't want to go into that. Not you. Yeah. So you're saying special relativity is not used along rotational. You say spelled along wrong. So really, what you're supposed to be saying, special relativity is not used along rotational motion. General relativity is. Yeah, that is seems to be the mainstream point of view on special relativity. If you want to go to rotation, then you need to go to general relativity. And what Stephan Gift seems to be saying is, instead of using Lorentz transformations on rotational motion, you should be using the Selleri transformations. So how does that sort of fit into that sort of scheme of things? It sounds like from that way that if rotation, if it's true that Selleri transformations can deal with rotation, then they're just part of general relativity by that sort of way of talking about things. But I don't think I managed to get that idea across to Stephan Gift, that there is that ambiguity here. So what else we got here? Yeah. So Kurt says Stephan Gift is correct. The relativistic simultaneity, that's relative simultaneity, is the necessary premise of special relativity. Necessary, not just sufficient. So by saying premise, I think you mean assumption. And I was pointing out that the relative simultaneity is an assumption, which seems to be added on to special relativity. But Stephan, I think, was trying to say that you could derive relative simultaneity as a prediction. And I wasn't taking that sort of view from it. So no simultaneous thing at all times cannot be to what I can see. Things need to be phrased properly. That's a bit unclear. So this person points out they use a special relativity in astronomy, for example. So maybe try Selleri transformations for that. Well, the Selleri transformations have been used with some of the experiments that special relativity Lorentz transformations are useful, and it seems to fit in with them. I think there are differences, but no experiment has shown a difference as yet. So I don't see that. Astronomy do not say yes to general relativity. So he spelled relativity wrong. So I think the mainstream disagrees with that. So BH means black hole, I suppose. Yeah, so the mainstream, they adds on extra things like dark matter and dark energy to help them explain things. Roger, let him speak. Well, I think he did speak. I just interrupted you a few points, and then they can carry on. And he did the same to me. Okay. Yeah. So this one, now that this, I think it's 3i Atlas. Was there a hand up then? Somebody moved a hand. So this, yes, Vladimir wants to speak. Let's go. I mean, that Atlas thing's a diversion. It's sort of like, it's something else weird at the stage. Hi, hello.
Hi, Jim. Thank you so much for very good talk. At last, I understood the principal difference between Einstein theory and Selleri theory.
Yeah.
As you know, in my model, there is so-named cosmic medium. Cosmic medium immediately means that we have absolute time and absolute space, absolute numbers. That's why, as for me, there is a principal difference between special relativity as right now accepted by all the scientists and Selleri based on this absolute time and absolute space. From my point of view, this is the best way to go. All these mathematical tricks. What is your comments? What are you're doing with mathematics? It does matter for me. What does matter? Principal difference between these two theories. It's a principal difference. That's why you have some explanations from different point of view, but experimentally it's proved that there is a cosmic medium. There is so-named cosmic microwave background radiation as an absolute frame of reference, and there is an absolute time, as I told you many times. That's why for me, no doubts that only Selleri transformation based on these principal points, absolute time and space, is valid. And what is important, always, take a look at all the experiments you have right now. And as for me, it's right now it's it convinced me that all the experimental results can be explained in frames of Selleri transformation that in Einstein's relativity, special relativity. If 120 years not enough to have the complete, you know, eh, complete explanation, complete, rules of your special relativity. I don't know how many times, how many hundreds of years we need to specify Einstein's special relativity. And at the same time, 30 years ago, Selleri, he proposed his transformation, his theory, and still nobody wants to accept it. It's absolutely wrong. What's
Stephan
going on in physics?
Stephan Gift accepts it, I think.
Okay, thank you so much for very interesting, the report. And what is important, you absolutely convinced me that salary based on a special time, on absolute time and
Yeah.
space is absolutely right. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Okay. Cheers. Okay, finished. So
Yes,
I
yes, yes.
move you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you.
job. Great job.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, back to the comments here. So no more hands up. I think I'm all right. So back to the comments. Yeah. So this Atlas thing's very interesting. It's anyway. This person says about it. It will be at Earth site just. Will be out of Earth sight just above of Mars. We should take an eye on Jupiter because Jupiter is pair of Mars. I'm not quite sure what it means, but anyway, this Atlas thing, which is some celestial object, is coming into our solar system from I guess from interstellar space, and so it's interesting. So Joseph says, I completely agree that special relativity is a fundamental inconsistency. The way I talk about it is it's got a vagueness. It's an ambiguity. There's a lot of things in it. It's ambiguous. People do make claims about special relativity, but when you look into it, it's sort of like people sort of like make different claims, and so that's when they start becoming contradictory. I think this is more about the Atlas thing again. Okay, let's go on. Now wait a minute. So, okay. So Joseph says something doesn't quite fit between Lorentz transformations and the domain of space-time. Selleri transformations doesn't solve the problem. Well, when you talk about these mathematics, you got to talk about the domain of vacuability, and so in context of mainstream, you've got general relativity, and then below that you've got special. We can supposedly reduce to special relativity under certain conditions. So special relativity has a domain of vacuability in the context of Einstein's relativity. And when you go outside that, you're then supposed to go up to general relativity. But then general relativity, they often say, is incomplete. So other things need to be added to it. So the domain of vacuability of Einstein's relativity is all very vague. Yeah, so more on the comet, on not the comet, on Atlas. So Atlas is a very interesting thing. I don't think I think it's an asteroid. A lot of stuff on Atlas. Right, let's see another one. I think this is going on to thing. At the beginning, relativists, I presume that people believe in Einstein's relativity, informally made an additional assumption that influenced the direction of development of special relativity. Yeah, so with Einstein, with his special relativity, he's supposed to be started with two postulates about the principal relativity and the constancy of light speed. By light speed, it's vague as to what it means when you bring in this idea of two-way and one-way light speed, but then you're supposed to then add it on this idea of the principle of equivalence. And so general relativity is supposed to be an add-on. So they did make an additional assumption, but there seems to be implicit assumptions also added to it. Oh, sorry. So this one asks about Stephan Gift. Where do you use the Selleri transformation to derive GPS SANAC correction? So you'd obviously probably have to need to look at his papers on that to see where he's getting that information from. So it says space and time cannot be flat. The cosmos goes by levels. So in the Einstein's relativity context, when you talk about flat space-time, that seems to be when you're considering this no gravity. So obviously, really the universe has gravity. So really, you can't deal completely in the context of flat space-time, other than as an approximation. Right, so this assumption is space-time is a real structure. If this assumption is omitted, everything becomes mathematically simple. I suppose you mean go back to Newtonian physics, but that's a whole different issue. Right, let's see what I've got. We've got private chat as well. I don't think I can. So one comment here in the private chat is James is saying, so Roger is defending Einstein and special relativity. Correct? Question mark. I'm not defending Einstein's relativity. I'm saying it's vague, it's ambiguous, and that's a reason for rejecting it. And unfortunately, you end up in a position of having to disagree with Stephan Gift a bit because he's attacking Einstein's relativity as thinking of it as a theory which is clear in what it's saying. And my point of view, it's not. And so he's thinking it's a clear theory of saying such a thing, and so he can create a theory which is saying something different. In this case, Seleri's theory. So he's thinking Einstein's relativity is saying something, and Seleri's theory is saying something different. And so you can test the two theories. I'm saying no, Einstein's relativity is vague. You can't really do that. You can't really test it against another theory. It's sort of like if you've got another theory dealing with, say, Selleri transformations, and Einstein's relativity is a theory where it says, I need extra things added to it. And so if the mainstream suddenly says, oh yeah, Selleri transformations are a good thing, let's just add it to Einstein's relativity and carry on calling it Einstein's relativity. So it's a different way of looking at things. Next, Anybody else? Oh, I've got one more comment come through, I think. There we go. This one says, a flat space is not flexible as the cosmos is. Light should not be rigid, but I think that word is supposed to be pulsing. So the problem is in the context of general relativity, space-time is treated as flexible. And this person sounds like he doesn't want to go with that idea. So, okay, there's a lot of dissent against Einstein's relativity. Einstein's relativity brings up a lot of things. Not everybody likes this idea of space-time being flexible. Okay, I think that's it. I know more hands are coming up in the green room, and I think the comments have come to an end now. Hopefully I haven't missed anything, because comments are usually just among themselves. I'll go back. As it is, yeah, Atlas is an interesting thing. I think it's called 3i Atlas. It should be interesting to follow that. So, Stephan Gift has returned. Do you want to come on, Stephan? I think he does. He wants to go to stage. Hi. Okay. Welcome back.
Yes, Roger. Yes, okay. Roger. Yes, sir. Thanks, Roger. I just wanted to come back. I got distracted. I was dealing with something, but I saw one question from Jim. Jim was asking, where in the paper do I derive the Sagna correction? So he really should read through I think that is this in section 3 of the paper, where I show that the Selleri transformation could derive the clock synchronization algorithm, the whole equation. And the Lorentz transformation could only derive a part. And the remaining part, the so-called Sagna correction, is what you will see in the derivation by the Selleri, using the Selleri transformation. So I don't derive the correction as a term by itself. The full synchronization algorithm, the one I was emphasizing to you, that is what the GPS uses. And the only correct synchronization procedure that is used on this planet for an actual system, that one, the Selleri transformation produces the entire algorithm. The Lorentz transformation only can produce a part, and they have to add the second part, which is the Sagna correction, separately. They have to bring it from outside, as it will. Mm-hmm. And this is when they go and claim that, well, general relativity could do it, therefore it's okay with special relativity, and it doesn't work like that. But anyway, that was just to answer Jim's question. It's in the paper. And if he wants to communicate with me directly by email, he can do so, and we could talk about it further. Thanks, Roger.
Okay, thank you. Cheers. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye then. Take care. Okay, thank you. So I think that's pretty much the end of the talk then. And so if I go back to my conclusion at this stage. Hey. Okay. So is looking at things from my point of view, I'll just remove this comment a minute. I don't think there's any more comments coming through, is there? I don't think there's any more comments that are relevant. So the conclusion is sort of like from my point of view, looking at these things, is Einstein's relativity is vague. It's ambiguous as to what's really supposed to be a part of Einstein's relativity. And Stephan Gift doesn't seem to be looking at it from that way. But going from the mainstream is seems to be saying that Einstein's relativity is incomplete. And by saying it's incomplete, they're allowing other things to be added to it, because you need more added to it to make it a complete theory. So if they ever accept Selleri transformations as necessary, to their theorizing, in my view, they would just add it on to Einstein's relativity. And so they're not treating it as there's this theory of Einstein's relativity and this theory of Seleri's transformations. They're not something you can test by experiment. Or they're not treating it as two different theories that can be tested. All they got is Einstein's relativity. And if you go on an experiment and it shows you need Seleri's transformations, if they accept that that's what's really needed, then they would just add it to Einstein's relativity. Because they're treating Einstein's relativity is incomplete. And treating it as incomplete helps them to keep saving Einstein's relativity when it's faced with all these different problems. Okay, thank you. So that's the end. And it's the end of my talk, and I'll be closing down now. Nobody's putting their hand up. I don't think there's any more comments coming through. Thank you, everybody, for attending. End of talk. I'm closing down. Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. Have a nice time. Close. Take that. Bye. 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 See you next time when I'll try to find out more things about Einstein's relativity to complain about. End stream.